So like, here it is, you know, to me to shoot myself in my foot and won't get it out of my own way. Um, and you know, my life, that was, you know, before now, that was one of like the points in my life where I felt like I was doing the best. You know, I had my own place.
Let's celebrate.
Yeah, and but with the people I was like celebrating with, you know, they would stop celebrating, you know, Sunday, like after Saturday night. But for me, it turned into like it just all started washing together. And so Monday morning came, and I was calling a dealer like, you know, what's going on? And it just so slowly but surely it became like a daily thing for me. And I had been out of town at a music festival, and I had a pit bull at the time, and she ended up getting loose whenever I was gone out of town, and got hit by a truck. And you know, I was full-fledged coke addiction, pills, drinking all the time, smoking, um, pretty much just like lost in life. Even though like it might have appeared on the outside like I had it all together, like it was all like a house of cards just waiting to fall down. And that was the moment whenever I found out that my dog had died, that things did fall down.
How so?
I just gave up. Like it was almost, it's kind of, I don't know, it like just broke my spirit, you know, because it was all the different deaths in my life that I'd never dealt with, had all kinds of undealt with grief.
Now are this thing that's in your care that.
Yeah, it was something I could have prevented,
Mm-hmm.
like because she got out of the fence, and you know, looking back on it now, I don't blame myself, but in that moment, I did. Um, and that's when, like, you know, I've always been a drug addict. I think ever since I was age 14, probably when I first smoked and I first drank, I was an alcoholic and a drug addict. You know, I kind of joke around and say that my favorite drug has always been more.
Same.
It didn't really matter what it was. Like, if you had it, let's do it. And whenever we're done doing it, I'm gonna want to do more. You know, and but at that point, I guess I was 26 or 27, and that's whenever people started noticing that I had a problem, or they at least maybe not noticing for the first time, but like they started telling me, and I totally rebelled against that idea, and ended up pushing away. Like we had a really tight knit group of friends, and I had a great girlfriend at the time. You know, we had a good relationship, and I chose drugs over that. Um, which I guess goes back to me not feeling like I was good enough, or like I said, I knew I wasn't, or I thought I knew that I wasn't. So slowly but surely, my friends started, you know, I forced them out of my life because I was, like I said, I was just being selfish to the core and did not think about how any of my actions were impacting people around me. So coke slowly turned into crack. Did that for like a year, and I decided I was going to get off of crack, and I was sober from that. I'm not definitely not sober completely, but like I stopped smoking crack, and then I found meth, and you know, I was doing like pain pills all the time. I mean, my life, that's all it really revolved around. Like after I ended up quitting that job in Johnson City. So it was the best job I've ever had. I just, you know, threw it all away, man. The people in my life. So I was left, you know, just alone pretty much. And that's whenever the first time that I really experienced homelessness. Uh, I mean, people would let me stay on their couches here and there, but I didn't have a home of my own, which I, you know, was totally used to my entire life. I've never had to go without like I said, everything had been provided that I needed. And, you know, I know that this was putting through my family through, you know, just immense amounts of stress and worry. Um, the arrests started to get closer and closer together. The consequences, you know, got greater and greater and greater. And then one day someone like that I normally did pain pills with was like, well, have you ever tried this? And introduced me to heroin. And, you know, then like, that's all I wanted to do, really. like, and it's all I really did do was heroin and meth for, I don't know, I was 27, 28 whenever I, was introduced to that. And I did that for the next, like, I don't know, 4 years.
You said, when you say it like that, I did this for this minute, this long, and this long, and it's like, I know what you're talking about because I live that as well. A lot of people don't, but like when you say I did heroin for a little while, if you're anything like, addict, alcoholic, does it, it's like it becomes your identity, right? So it's like it's hard to tell where Matt ends and the heroin begins or whatever. It's like that's my identity for
Yeah.
that long.
Yeah, I
My
mean,
salvation.
like I can look back on it and like, that was,
Eat,
I don't know.
sleep, and breathe. If I do sleep, right?
Yeah, definitely, man. Like, and it becomes the most important thing.
Yeah.
Like, I always like to think of myself as like a good person, if you will. But the person that's on those drugs, I'm no longer that great of a, I don't act like a good person anyways.
No doubt.
And maybe deep down I am, but I no longer act like it,
So what happened?
Well, I ended up, for those next 3 or 4 years, I was, homeless off and on the whole time. It got to the point where I totally pushed my family away. That luckily for me, they never like actually gave up hope, and like if I ever acted like I wanted to do better, like they were there, so they didn't totally abandon me, even though like poor old me, that's how I acted, because I couldn't call and get help anymore because, I'm like, well, I guess one of the times like that it was an eye opener for me. I mean, my eyes weren't open long, but once I got out of jail, I was right back to the same thing. But like my mom, I think it was my mom, probably and my dad too. They refused to bail me out of jail. I mean, they never really have that many times, maybe once or twice. But like I remember my mom saying, like, I know where you're at now, at least. Like I know that you're relatively safe. So like it was like I knew that I was really screwing up in life. That my mom was
safest and best place
for me was in jail, Um, so let's see. In January of 2021, I ended up getting arrested with, I don't know, some pretty serious charges, 2 felony drug charges and a list of other misdemeanor charges. And those were definitely like the greatest consequences that I've ever been facing, still dealing with currently today. So like I got bonded out of jail that time, the next day really, which was a miracle. But like, it scared me to death from like that point on. It's almost like I was in jail in my head mentally, because like all I could think about, like, I was like, I was miserable. I was depressed all the time, constantly anxious. No one wanted to be around me. And like, I guess it's around that time that the drugs like stopped doing what I wanted them to. So like I would get high and I would still be miserable. And that's whenever I started to coming around to the idea like I have to do something different or I'm going to just end up in prison and, die a drug addict. I still didn't do anything about it yet. You
were aware that you needed to.
Yeah, I knew that was like the first time that like I even thought like, I don't think I even had like submitted to the idea that I am a drug addict. I blamed, well, if you would do drugs like I did if this happened, or blah, 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 blah. But, so in, I guess it was a whole nother year before I decided to actually try to get help. In March of 2022 is the first time I went to a detox. And,
what was that like?
That was miserable, man. It was really like, those 5 days that I was in detox was the longest that I'd been sober in, I don't know, 18, 19 years. And I was like 145, 150 pounds, soaking wet. It looks terrible. Like one of my close friends that I hadn't spoke with in a while, he was in rehab at the time, and he was like, Matt, you need to do the 28-day program. But like my entire life, I've wanted to fix, manage, and control, and I always knew the best way. I wasn't ever willing to take suggestions from anybody. And I was like, no, man, I've already got it figured out. I'm going to a sober living house down in Knoxville, and I'm going to be fine. I'm just going to get away from the drugs, and everything's going to be fine. The geographical cure, I guess I've heard it called. So I was in that sober living program for like 8 days, and was right back on heroin. So the next, I don't know, 6 months, 7 months was just more of the same. The last year that I was doing drugs, I overdosed probably, I think it was like 8 or 9 times. And it was, just the grace of God that kept me alive, because some of those times I was alone and just, and I've always had like, even from like a teenage time, like I had suicidal ideations. I didn't really want to die, but I wanted like life as I knew it to not be that way anymore.
That's a good way of putting it.
Yeah. Like I was miserable. So I decided, I went back to a detox again, and I left like 2 days in to go get high. I don't know. I just didn't have it in me yet. I don't guess. Like didn't click yet. But on that following October 2022, I decided that I was like really going to try to get clean. Really, I made it up in my mind that like I was going to get clean, because I was tired of like, I couldn't walk into a room with my head held high. I was just full of guilt and shame. I was tired of hurting all the people that were around me. So, on July of 2022, I got arrested, so that helped. That helped me get clean. But I got out of jail on September 27th of last year, and all I had to do was stay sober for like 34 days, and I had a bed date for it to be intake that Magnolia Ridge. And in those 34 days, that's when I realized like how powerless over alcohol I was. Like my life was totally unmanageable, because I overdosed 3 times after being in jail for those last 3 months, swearing on everything that I wasn't going to do drugs anymore. I was done, blah, blah, blah. So on Halloween of last year, October 31st, that's when October 30th was the last day that I've done any like narcotics or drank any alcohol. So October 31st was my sobriety date. And Halloween, dressed up as a sober person.
I love that. If you ever mess that up, you can't say that anymore. It's like, you can't do that, bro. So what's life look like today?
Today, man, like I think one of my favorite things about my life today is I have the ability to be present and like live in the moment. For as long as I can remember in my life, I was always depressed about the past or anxious about the future, and it didn't really matter who I was around. I was withdrawn, and I was just miserable. It was no fun to be around. And today I'm able to, walk into a room with my head held high, and I can be present with my mom, my dad, my sister, and my nephew. I get to be an uncle that my nephew can rightfully look up to. He probably still looked up to me, but that was because he was too young to know any better. I have the ability to be a good friend. I have great friends in my life who don't want anything from me other than
for you to exist.
For me to exist. And I can't. I've had that at points in my life, but not people that I didn't push away. Because I didn't want that for me.
It's a key ingredient. It's not necessarily getting all of these things. It's how do I keep these things.
Yeah, I've never had the ability before today to do that. So Now I just try to go to where sober people are most of the time. Like I don't know. I'm able to keep a job. I'm actually a good employee. Um,
These things seem to the untrained eye, right? It seems so remedial, like trivial, like how wow you're like okay you're a good employee or like you're a good uncle like that. How are those not natural things to do? And then you know, people talk about addictions like well you chose to give all these things away. I mean, like you chose the dope. You even said it yourself. I chose the dope over like my girl and my friends.
it
My
doesn't
family.
seem that way in the moment.
I don't think it is that way.
That's fair.
I don't know that we're like bad people trying to get good. I think we're sick people trying to get well.
That's the best way you can put it, really.
Being trapped in that.
And like I do agree that I chose to put the drug or the drink into my body for the first time, but I didn't choose how my body reacted to it. Like I didn't plan on the first time that I got high when I was 13, 14 years old. I didn't plan on that being who I was for the next almost 20 years.
You spent 20 years thinking as such, right?
Yeah, and it's hard to believe that it was that long, really. It doesn't seem like it, but
I often think about passage of time too here recently too, but how fast and all how it goes and how it seems like you can look back over the landscape of 20 years in the blink of an eye, right? How it happens in your mind, but uh, I don't necessarily think it's like wasted time or it's like I didn't know or I was like it's the classic thing, right? I wasted all this time and threw all this stuff away, but like I mean the important things like what you just talked about, like being a son, being a friend, being an uncle, a brother, somebody that somebody can depend on, right? Like I'm putting in more into life today than I'm taking out of it.
yeah, like I do my best today to like not let selfishness control who I am. I try to help others as much as I can. Um, my whole life, I've only been concerned with how things uh, helped or impacted my life. It was never about anybody else's, and I'm trying to do something different about that today.
Yeah. What's the coolest thing about your life, you think?
Like I guess the freedom
What do you mean?
from drugs and alcohol, man. Like there was always things that I wanted to go do, but now all I have to do is like work and go do those things instead of like not whenever I was doing drugs, man, like it was like the all too common for me to be like, oh, I can't go do that because I don't have any drugs. And then I would have drugs and I'd be like, oh, I don't want to go do that because I have drugs.
Yeah.
So it was like my life was only about drugs, and now it's not.
Freedom to move about the country.
Yeah.
Right on. Last question. If you could take a movie, any movie, but you had to replace all the characters with Muppets except one. One character got to be human. What movie would you do?
Probably Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
That would be pretty fun.
And obviously, I guess you're keeping Johnny Depp.
Yeah.
Okay. That's fair. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.